My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 35 years old, and if you're watching this right now, I want to ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, because I want to see how far this story travels. Maybe someone out there has gone through what I went through. You see, I always believed in family. I was raised to think that no matter what happens, blood will always stand by you. But what if I told you that sometimes it's the people you love most who can break you in ways you never imagined? It happened on a Saturday. My little boy, Ethan, had just turned 7. We'd been planning his birthday for weeks: blue balloons, a Spider-Man cake, and a backyard full of laughter. I'd invited everyone, neighbors, a few friends from school, and most importantly, my parents. I paid my parents $750 every week, not as a favor, but because I wanted to help them. After Dad's back injury, they lost almost everything. Dad couldn't work, Mom's small business shut down, and I stepped in. Every Friday, I'd send them the money without fail. I never asked for it back. I just wanted them to live comfortably. So when they didn't show up to Ethan's birthday, I thought something terrible had happened. I called. No answer. I texted. Nothing. Hours passed, and as the kids played, I kept glancing at the driveway, waiting to see their old gray SUV pull up. But it never did. Later that evening, after the last child had gone home and the leftover cake was sitting cold on the counter, I finally got a call back from my mom. Her voice was calm, almost cold. "Mom," I said, trying to sound gentle. "Why didn't you come?" Ethan kept asking where you were. There was a short silence on the line before she replied, flatly, "Because your child means nothing to us." I froze. I actually thought I misheard her. "What did you just say?" I whispered. "You heard me, Rachel. We didn't want to come. Your son isn't important to us." I felt something inside me crack, a mix of pain, disbelief, and rage. My hands trembled as I held the phone. Ethan was still in the living room, showing his new toys to his friends. He had no idea his grandparents had just said something so cruel. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just said quietly, "Okay." Then I hung up. 30 minutes later, I did something I never thought I'd do. I cut them off completely. I blocked their numbers, froze the account I used to send them money, and sat on the edge of my bed shaking. My heart pounded so loud it felt like thunder in my chest. That was the moment everything changed. But to understand how we got here, to this breaking point, you need to know how it all began. Growing up in a small town in Wisconsin, I was the eldest of 3 kids. My parents were strict but proud. My dad worked long hours at the mill, and Mom ran a little bakery out of our kitchen. We didn't have much, but we had each other. At least, that's what I believed. I remember Mom's voice always sharp, cutting through the air whenever I made a mistake. "Rachel, why can't you be more like your cousin? She's prettier, smarter, and she doesn't talk back." Dad wasn't cruel, but he was distant. He believed emotions were a sign of weakness. The only time he smiled was when he was talking about money. When I got into college on a scholarship, they didn't come to my graduation. Mom said they were too tired. Dad said gas prices were high. I didn't cry. I told myself they loved me in their own way. Years later, when Dad got hurt and couldn't work anymore, I was the one who helped them. I just started my career in accounting, and I wasn't making much, but I sent them what I could. At first, it was $300 a week. Then $500. Then $750. Mom would always say, "We're so proud of you, sweetheart." But deep down, I could feel something else behind her tone, like my success made her angry instead of happy. Still, I kept giving. I paid for their bills, fixed their leaking roof, and even bought them a new TV for Christmas. I wanted to believe that love could fix everything. When Ethan was born, I thought things would finally change. I imagined my parents holding him, laughing, finally softening. For a while, it seemed like that dream might come true. Mom came over every Sunday to help, but she mostly criticized. "You shouldn't feed him that," she'd say. "He's getting too attached to you." Dad stayed quiet, always glued to the TV, barely acknowledging Ethan. Still, I told myself they cared. The truth came crashing down 7 years later, on that birthday. After hanging up the phone that night, I just sat there staring into the dark. Ethan was asleep, clutching his new toy truck. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from my younger sister, Lily. "Hey, Mom told me not to come either. She said you've gotten too proud since you started making money." "I'm sorry. Too proud? All I ever did was give. Give time. Give money. Give patience." I felt tears slide down my face. I wasn't angry at Lily. She'd always been the peacemaker. But now, it was clear that Mom had been saying things about me behind my back for years. The realization cut deeper than I could handle. My hands were shaking as I typed out my reply, but then deleted it. What was the point? Instead, I turned off my phone and walked to Ethan's room. I sat by his bed, brushed his hair back, and whispered, "You'll never have to beg for love like I did." That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying my mother's words. "Your child means nothing to us." The next morning, I woke up determined. I wasn't going to let their coldness define me anymore. I'd spent my entire life earning their approval, but no amount of kindness could fill a heart that refused to love. Still, something inside me whispered that it wasn't over, that there was more to their behavior than simple cruelty. Something hidden, but I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that for the first time, I felt free and terrified at the same time. The freedom didn't last long, though, because 3 days later, something happened that changed everything again, and that's where things took a turn I never saw coming. Where are you watching this from? Let me know in the comments below, because what happened next, no one was prepared for it. If you're just joining, my name's Rachel Morgan, and I'm 35 years old. Last time, I told you about how my parents skipped my son Ethan's 7th birthday after I'd been paying them $750 a week for years. When I called to ask why, my mother said, "Your child means nothing to us." 30 minutes later, trembling, I cut them off. That night, I thought I'd reached the lowest point of my life. But I was wrong. The real storm was only beginning. 3 days after Ethan's birthday, I was at work in my cubicle, trying to focus on numbers that refused to make sense. My head was spinning. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my mother's voice echoing. I took a sip of cold coffee and forced myself to breathe. "You did the right thing," I told myself. "You finally stood up for yourself." Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my dad. I hadn't blocked him yet. Part of me still hoped maybe he'd apologize, explain that Mom was just angry or upset. But when I opened the message, my heart sank. "You've made your choice, Rachel. Don't come to us when things fall apart." I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I wanted to type something back, maybe beg him to be kind, or ask why he was letting Mom turn him against me. But then I remembered the way he'd always been, quiet, obedient, always letting her speak for both of them. I deleted the message and finally blocked his number too. That should have been the end of it. But later that day, I got a call from Ethan's school. His teacher, Mrs. Parks, said he'd been unusually quiet and distracted. When she asked him what was wrong, he'd said, "Grandma doesn't love me anymore." That broke me. I left work early, drove straight to his school, and hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, "Grandma and Grandpa are just busy, okay? But you have me. Always." He nodded, his eyes wide and sad. "But they didn't come to my birthday," he whispered. "I know," I said, forcing a smile. "But sometimes grown-ups make mistakes too." I tried to keep my voice steady, but inside, I was crumbling. That evening, while Ethan watched his favorite cartoon, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at my bank app. For the first time in years, the automatic transfer to my parents hadn't gone out. It felt strange, like breaking a habit that had controlled me. $750 a week. That was $3,000 a month. $36,000 a year. Over 6 years, I'd given them more than $200,000. I whispered it out loud, as if saying the number would make it make sense. 200,000. And yet, all it bought me was silence. I leaned back, remembering every time I'd said no to myself so they could have more. The time I skipped a vacation to pay for their roof repairs. The time I postponed buying Ethan a new bed because Dad wanted to upgrade their old car. I thought love meant giving everything. But maybe it was time to learn that love also means setting boundaries. Still, I couldn't shake the unease in my gut. My parents were cruel, but they were also dependent on that money. How were they surviving now? I didn't want to care, but I did. A week passed. Life slowly began to feel lighter. Ethan started smiling again. We baked together, read bedtime stories, and even planned a weekend trip to the park. Then, one Sunday morning, I was washing dishes when someone knocked on the door. I wiped my hands and opened it, only to find Lily, my younger sister, standing there with tears in her eyes. "Rachel," she said, her voice shaking. "You need to hear this." I led her inside and poured her some water. She looked exhausted. Her hands were trembling. "What's going on?" I asked. "It's Mom and Dad," she said quietly. "They've been telling everyone in town that you abandoned them. They're saying you're selfish, that you stopped helping because you think you're too good for us." My chest tightened. "They what?" She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "And that's not all. They told Aunt Carol you stole money from them, that you used their savings to start your business." I froze. "That's a lie. I never." "I know," she interrupted. "I told them it wasn't true. But they wouldn't listen. Mom said she's done pretending you're her daughter." Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I sank into a chair, my heartbeat loud in my ears. Why would they do this? I helped them, Lily. I took care of them. Lily's voice broke. "Because they're angry. Mom said she'll teach you a lesson for cutting them off." I felt my throat tighten. A lesson? She said you'll regret turning your back on family. That's when I realized this wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. They were trying to destroy my reputation. That night, I lay awake replaying Lily's words. My parents had always been difficult, but this was something darker. Something deliberate. I tried to convince myself it would blow over, that they'd get tired and move on. But I was wrong. The next morning, when I got to work, my manager, Tom Sanders, called me into his office. He looked serious. "Rachel, I just wanted to check in with you. We got a strange voicemail last night. Someone claiming to be your mother." My stomach dropped. "What did she say?" "She said you've been taking money from her. That you've been using your position here to hide transactions." "What?" I gasped, my voice trembling. "That's not true, Tom. You know me. You've seen my record." "I do," he said gently. "And don't worry, we didn't take it seriously. But maybe you should handle this personally before it gets worse." I sat there in stunned silence. My own mother had called my employer. It wasn't just anger now, it was vengeance. After work, I went home and sat on the couch, staring into space. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold my phone. I wanted to call her and demand an explanation, but I stopped myself. There was no reasoning with people like her. Instead, I wrote down every word Lily had told me, every detail I could remember from the voicemail Tom described. Something inside me whispered that I might need proof, just in case. Ethan came running into the room holding his toy plane. "Mommy, look what I made." I smiled weakly. "That's amazing, sweetheart." He climbed onto my lap, his little hands warm against mine. "You okay, Mommy?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, baby. I'm okay." But I wasn't. Because deep down, I knew something had shifted forever. And just when I thought my parents couldn't go any lower. 2 nights later, as I tucked Ethan into bed, I heard a sound outside. Tires crunching on gravel. Headlights cutting across the window. My stomach turned cold. When I looked out, I saw a car I recognized immediately. My parents' gray SUV. It sat there in the dark, engine running, lights off. Then, slowly, the driver's door opened. I couldn't see who got out, but I knew it was them. And that's when the knocking started. Loud, slow, unsettling. Knock, knock, knock. I froze, my heart pounding. What did they want? Why were they here, after everything? I didn't know it then, but opening that door would lead to something I never could have imagined. If you're following along, you know my name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 35, and my life had just taken a terrifying turn. My parents, after years of me helping them financially, $7.50 a week, had skipped my son Ethan's birthday, called him worthless, and now they were outside my house, knocking. I stood frozen by the window, Ethan clutching his Spider-Man blanket behind me, too young to understand the tension in the air. I didn't move at first. My mind raced. Do I call the police? Do I just ignore them? Why now? The knocking continued, louder this time. Then a familiar voice called through the door. Rachel, open up. We need to talk. I froze. That calm, fake voice, like nothing was wrong, made my blood boil. My mother. I swallowed hard. I had to protect Ethan, and yet a part of me felt curious. Why were they here after everything they'd said and done? I decided to ignore them. I walked back to the living room and locked the door behind me. Ethan clung to me tightly. Mommy, are they mad at us? He whispered. I forced a smile. No, baby. They're just lost. Let's not worry about them tonight. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. The next morning, I tried to push the incident out of my mind. I told myself I would not let them control my life anymore. I had spent enough years worrying about their moods, their approval, their lies. I took Ethan to the park to play. We laughed, ran around, and for a while I almost felt like life could go back to normal. Almost. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Rachel, you can't ignore us forever. We know where you live. We are your family. Open the door. I stared at the screen, frozen. I could feel Ethan's little hand slip into mine. He looked up at me, his eyes full of trust. I typed back, shaking. Stop contacting me. Do not come near us. No reply. Over the next few days, strange things began happening. Packages were left at my door with no return address. Small, harmless at first. A scarf, a toy, a note saying, "Remember us?" I didn't touch them. I called the police once, but they said without proof of intent or threat, there was little they could do. Still, fear crept into every corner of my home. I stopped leaving the house without checking outside first. I installed new locks. I even bought a security camera. Through it all, Ethan remained blissfully unaware, asking only when we could bake cupcakes together or go on a trip. His innocence became my anchor. But one evening, as I reviewed the security footage, my stomach dropped. There they were, my parents, standing at the edge of our driveway, watching the house. Not knocking, not calling, just standing there, staring. I could see my mother's face clearly. Cold. Smug. Like she was enjoying this. I felt my blood run cold. This wasn't about money anymore. This wasn't about Ethan's birthday. This was about control. I called Lily immediately. Rachel, what is it? She asked, panic in her voice. They're here, Lily. Watching us. My parents. I think they're planning something. Lily hesitated. Are you sure? I handed her my phone with the footage. Look for yourself. She gasped. Oh my God. Rachel, you need to be careful. They're dangerous when they feel like they've lost control. I didn't sleep that night. Ethan was beside me, unaware, and I held him close, praying he wouldn't sense my fear. The next day, I decided to take precautions. I asked Tom at work if I could work from home for the week. He agreed, understanding the seriousness in my voice. I also began documenting everything, texts, calls, footage. Every interaction, every strange package. If this escalated, I needed proof. Then, 30 minutes after lunch, there was a knock at the back door. My heart stopped. I hadn't seen anyone there before. I grabbed Ethan, whispered, "Stay behind me," and opened the door just a crack. It was Dad. Alone. His expression was unreadable. "Rachel," he said softly, "can we talk?" I didn't answer. "I just want to explain," he continued. "We didn't mean what we said about Ethan." I felt something inside me tighten, a mix of anger and disbelief. "Explain?" I asked, voice shaking. "You called my child worthless. You lied about me, and now you show up expecting what?" He flinched. We just want to make things right." I laughed bitterly. Make things right? Do you even know what that means? He didn't answer. At that moment, a sudden crash came from the front of the house. Glass shattered. I spun around. Through the living room window, I saw the headlights of a car speeding away, Mom's car. She had just thrown a brick through my window. Ethan screamed, hiding behind me. I felt my hands go cold. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was violence. I grabbed my phone and called 911. My voice trembled as I told the dispatcher everything. While I waited, I held Ethan close, feeling the weight of betrayal, fear, and the realization that the woman who gave birth to me had turned into my enemy. And at that moment, I understood something I hadn't fully realized before. Love doesn't always come from blood. Sometimes it has to come from courage and the people you choose to protect. But just as I thought I had finally taken control, the doorbell rang again. 3 slow, deliberate rings. And I knew this time it wasn't just Mom or Dad. It was something bigger. If you're just joining, my name is Rachel Morgan, I'm 35, and my life has become a nightmare. My parents, after I had been supporting them with $750 a week for years, skipped my son Ethan's birthday, called him worthless, and then escalated to threatening and violent behavior. And now they weren't done. The 3 slow rings of the doorbell made my heart stop. I stood frozen, Ethan clutching my leg. My first instinct was to ignore it, but a small, terrifying voice in my head said, "They won't stop. Not until they get what they want." I peeked through the peephole. No one was there. Just the empty porch, the shadows stretching long in the early evening. I opened the door cautiously. Nothing. Then I noticed a small envelope sitting on the welcome mat. My name was scrawled across it in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper. "You think you can cut us off? You think money and independence can save you? You've made a mistake, Rachel. Ethan belongs with us. Think carefully about your next steps." I felt my stomach turn. They were threatening to take my son. My blood ran cold. I knew I had to stay calm for Ethan. I stuffed the note in my pocket and locked the door again, double-checking all the locks. I called Lily immediately. "Lily, they're threatening Ethan now. I don't know what to do." "I knew it would escalate," she said, her voice tight. "Rachel, you need to get him out of the house tonight. Somewhere safe." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I didn't even wait to explain to Ethan. I packed a bag with essentials, clothes, toys, a few of his favorite snacks, and whispered, "Ethan, we're going on a little adventure." He looked at me, puzzled. "Are we going to Grandma's?" "No, baby," I said, hugging him tightly. "Just a special trip for us." We drove to Lily's apartment across town, my hands gripping the wheel like it was my lifeline. I parked a block away and walked in quietly, breathing in the safety of her apartment. For the first time in days, I felt a sliver of relief. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ethan had curled up next to me, and I could hear him breathing softly. But every creak of the building made my heart race. Lily stayed on the couch, scrolling through her phone, checking news feeds and local alerts. "I think they might try something more aggressive," she whispered. "We need a plan." I nodded. "I don't understand. Why is it so hard for them to just let me be? I gave them everything." "They think it's control, Rachel," Lily said. "It's never been about love. They see you as a threat to their authority. And when they can't control you, they destroy." Her words made sense, and yet they didn't make the fear go away. The next day, I called my lawyer, who advised me to file a restraining order immediately. He said it might take time to process, but in the meantime, I needed to make sure Ethan was safe. I also called the police and explained the situation. They promised extra patrols around Lily's apartment and took my statement about the brick thrown through the window. Even with all these precautions, the anxiety didn't leave me. I was living every parent's worst nightmare, wondering if the people who were supposed to love my child unconditionally could truly be capable of harming him. Then came the late-night phone call that changed everything. My cell rang at 11:47 p.m. The number was blocked. I picked it up cautiously. "Rachel, A familiar voice whispered. It was my mother. I froze. Don't call me, I said firmly. You think you can hide from us? She hissed. You think your little bubble will protect you? We're coming for Ethan. And there's nothing you can do to stop us. My hand shook so badly, I could barely hold the phone. Mom, you've already hurt me enough. Leave him out of this. Too late, she spat, and the line went dead. I dropped the phone and sank into the floor, holding Ethan close. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I realized then that I couldn't rely on anyone but myself. No legal orders, no police patrols, no lawyer. None of that could stop them if they were determined. The next morning, I made a decision. I had to leave town. Immediately. I packed our essentials into the car, clothes, food, toys, important documents, and made a mental map of where we could go. We were going on the run. Ethan looked up at me, a little confused. Mommy, where are we going? To a safe place, baby, I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel. Somewhere we can be happy and safe. I didn't know where that was yet, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't let them hurt my son. As we drove away, leaving behind our home, the fear and uncertainty loomed large. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I half expected to see the gray SUV following us. And I wasn't wrong. 30 minutes down the highway, headlights appeared in the distance, slow, deliberate, following our every move. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white. This wasn't just about money, or hurt feelings, or even Ethan's birthday anymore. This was a full-blown war. If you've been following my story, you know by now that my name is Rachel Morgan, I'm 35, and my life had spiraled into chaos. My parents, after years of me sending them $750 a week, skipped my son Ethan's birthday, called him worthless, threatened me, and now, were chasing us down the highway. Ethan was in the back seat, clutching his Spider-Man blanket. His little eyes were wide with confusion. Mommy, why are those lights following us? He whispered. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice calm. It's okay, baby. Just keep your head down. Mommy's got this. I didn't have this. We drove for what felt like hours, taking back roads, avoiding the main highways. My heart pounded in my chest. Every turn, every curve, I half expected to see that gray SUV pull up behind us. I called Lily, my sister, to update her. Lily, they're following us. I don't know what to do. Rachel, go to the police. Now. Tell them you're being followed. And don't stop until they intervene, she urged. I nodded. I didn't have time to argue. I pulled into the nearest police station parking lot, Ethan still in the car. I rushed inside and told the officers everything. Our history, the threats, the brick through the window, the voicemail, the stalking on the road. They radioed for patrol units to locate the vehicle. I watched through the glass as Ethan clutched my hand, trembling. 30 minutes later, the police found the gray SUV a few blocks away. The driver had stopped when they saw the squad cars and took off on foot. I breathed a shaky sigh of relief. For now, we were safe. But safety was temporary. That night, as Ethan slept in Lily's apartment, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, planning our next steps. I needed a permanent solution. I couldn't stay in Wisconsin. My parents had proven they didn't care about love or decency. They only cared about control. I researched relocation programs for parents fleeing dangerous family members, found temporary housing options, and began the long process of changing our lives entirely. Over the next few days, life settled into a tense routine. Ethan went to a new school near Lily's place. I worked remotely, and we stayed vigilant. Every sound outside made me jump. Every phone call was a potential threat. Then came the text. You can't hide forever, Rachel. We will find Ethan. And then you'll regret everything. It was from an unknown number, but I knew the voice behind it. I felt a surge of anger. For years, I had given them money, respect, and patience. And this threat was what they offered in return. I blocked the number and took a deep breath. I refused to let fear control me. 2 weeks later, the worst happened. I was picking Ethan up from school when I saw her, my mother. She was standing near the playground, pretending to wait for someone. Her eyes met mine, cold and calculating. I froze. She wasn't supposed to know where we were. I grabbed Ethan's hand and ran, weaving through the crowd. My heart pounded. I pushed open the school gates and sprinted to the car. She followed, her pace quick, determined. I jumped into the car, locked the doors, and sped away. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sight of her face haunted me. Every plan I made felt temporary. Every moment of safety was fragile. And then, just as I was starting to feel some control, Lily knocked on the door. She looked pale. "Rachel, we need to talk. Something happened today. Your dad, he's involved now. He's joining her. They're working together." I felt my stomach drop. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean?" I whispered. "They've been talking to someone who knows about our new location. They're planning something. I don't know what yet, but it's not good." I sank into the couch, holding Ethan close. My mind raced. Every nightmare I'd imagined was coming true. And now, I had to face the fact that my parents weren't just toxic, they were dangerous. I realized something crucial. Running wasn't enough anymore. I needed a plan to protect Ethan permanently. And just when I thought the situation couldn't get worse, the phone rang. It was a block number. And this time, a voice whispered something I would never forget. "Rachel, you're running out of time." If you've been following along, you know my name is Rachel Morgan, I'm 35, and my life had spiraled into chaos. My parents, after years of me paying them $750 a week, skipped my son Ethan's birthday, called him worthless, threw a brick through my window, and chased us down the highway. Now, it had escalated to something far worse. The phone call that night was the tipping point. A voice whispered, "Rachel, you're running out of time." I sat frozen, clutching the phone like it was a lifeline and a curse all at once. Ethan stirred in his sleep beside me, and I swallowed the lump in my throat. I will not let them take him. The next morning, I began taking action. I contacted my lawyer, my police officer friends, and even a private investigator. I couldn't let fear dictate my life anymore. I had to be proactive. Ethan and I moved into a safe house arranged by a support network for parents fleeing dangerous relatives. It was small but secure. Cameras, locks, alarms. All of it was designed to keep him safe. I felt a sliver of relief, though anxiety still lingered. Lily helped me create a strict routine: school, work, and minimal outside exposure. No one could know where we were. Even friends were told we were on a short vacation. For the first week, things were quiet. I thought we had finally found safety. I started to let my guard down, reading bedtime stories to Ethan, baking cupcakes, and laughing with him in the evenings. But then came a knock at the front door. I froze. It was late, nearly midnight. My heart raced as I peeked through the peephole. No one was there. Just a small package on the mat. Inside, a note. "You think you can hide, Rachel? We are closer than you imagine. Ethan belongs to us." Fear and anger boiled inside me. They won't stop. They will never stop. I called Lily, who immediately went into protective mode. "Rachel, this is serious. You have to be ready for anything. I mean anything. We can't underestimate them." I nodded, my hands trembling. "I know, but how do you fight people who are supposed to be your family? They're not family, Rachel. They're predators. And predators can be stopped," she said firmly. Her words gave me a spark of hope. I realized then that I couldn't just react. I had to plan. I had to be smarter than they were. 2 nights later, I heard noises outside the safe house again. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, circling the property. I grabbed my phone and quietly activated the security cameras. On the screens, I saw them, my parents, moving around, trying to find a way in. My blood ran cold. I called the police, but they warned me it might take several minutes for units to arrive. Minutes that could change everything. I turned to Ethan, whispering, "Stay here, baby. Mommy's going to protect you." The door suddenly rattled. My mother's voice shouted through the locked front door. "Open up, Rachel. You can't keep him from us." I held Ethan close and whispered, "We're not going anywhere." Then the front window shattered. Glass flew everywhere. I ducked, pulling Ethan behind me. And that's when I saw them. Not just Mom and Dad. Someone else was with them. A stranger, dark and menacing, helping them try to break in. I felt my heart stop. My worst fears had come true. They had escalated beyond me, beyond my control. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and whispered a prayer before dialing 911. But even as I spoke, my mind raced. How had they found us?
Who was helping them?
And most importantly, how could I protect Ethan when the people who should have loved him most were trying to hurt him? The police sirens wailed in the distance. But the tension, the terror, and the uncertainty didn't leave. My parents were no longer just toxic, they were dangerous. And now it was a race against time. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I couldn't let them win. And then the stranger spoke. A calm, chilling voice. Rachel Morgan, it's time to hand him over. My blood ran cold. The stranger's voice cut through the night like a blade, calm, cold, and terrifying. Rachel Morgan, he said again, standing in the shattered glow of the porch light. You've caused enough trouble. Hand over the boy. Ethan whimpered behind me, clutching my shirt. My mother stood a few feet behind the man, her eyes blank, almost hypnotized, like she wasn't even herself anymore. My father, pale and sweating, kept glancing around nervously, as if realizing they'd gone too far but were too deep to back out now. I stepped forward slowly, my heart pounding. You're not taking him. Not tonight, not ever. The man smirked, like I'd said something amusing. You don't understand, do you? This isn't about you anymore. Before I could answer, red and blue lights flashed down the street. Police cars screeched to a halt. Officers jumped out with their guns drawn, shouting commands. The stranger backed away, melting into the shadows, disappearing before I could even scream. My parents were arrested on the spot, trespassing, vandalism, attempted break-in, and endangerment. My mom didn't fight. She just stared at me through the flashing lights with those cold, empty eyes and whispered, "You'll regret this, Rachel." I held Ethan tighter.
No, Mom.
You'll regret losing your soul. The next few days felt like a blur. Detectives came, statements were taken, and evidence was collected. The stranger was still out there, but now there was a full investigation. My parents had clearly been involved with someone darker, someone using their bitterness and greed for something bigger. I learned that the man was a known fraudster who had scammed several elderly people into selling their homes. My parents had apparently signed documents that gave him access to their accounts, and in return, he promised them a way to get back at me for cutting them off. They'd been manipulated, but they'd also allowed it. Weeks passed before I found the courage to visit them in county jail.
I didn't do it for them.
I did it for closure. For Ethan. Mom sat across from me, wearing a gray jumpsuit, her face lined with exhaustion. She wouldn't meet my eyes at first. You look good, she muttered. I didn't smile. I didn't come for small talk. Her lips trembled. He told us if we helped him, we could fix everything. He said you'd forgive us if we got your attention. I stared at her, speechless. By scaring your grandson? By breaking into my house? By saying he means nothing to you? She started to cry, but I couldn't feel sympathy anymore. Not this time. You made your choice, I said quietly. And now I'm making mine. I stood, my voice steady. You will never be near my son again. I forgive you, but I don't trust you. There's a difference. Mom whispered, Rachel, please. But I turned and walked away. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for choosing peace. Back home, Ethan and I began to heal. We painted his new bedroom bright blue and planted flowers outside the window. Every morning, we said the same thing before leaving for school and work. Today, we choose kindness. It became our ritual, our way of reclaiming what was almost stolen from us. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Ethan looked up at me and said, Mommy, are Grandma and Grandpa bad people? I thought for a moment, then knelt beside him.
No, sweetheart.
They made bad choices. But sometimes, people get lost when they forget what love really means. He nodded thoughtfully. So, we don't hate them? I smiled softly.
No.
We just don't follow them anymore. He grinned, hugged me tight, and ran off to play. Months later, I received a letter from the prison. My father's handwriting filled the envelope.
It read,
Rachel, I know we've done unforgivable things, but I want you to know we finally understand. Family isn't about money or pride. It's about the people who stay, even when it's hard. We lost sight of that. We lost you. Please don't let bitterness be the last thing you remember about us. I cried reading it, not because I forgave them entirely, but because maybe, just maybe, the lesson had finally reached them. Years later, Ethan grew into a compassionate young man, gentle, wise, and strong. I told him the truth about our family when he was old enough to understand. He listened quietly and said, You broke the cycle, Mom. That's what matters. He was right. The real story wasn't about betrayal or revenge. It was about courage, the courage to walk away from pain, to rebuild with love, and to teach forgiveness without reopening old wounds. If you're watching this or listening right now, wherever you are, maybe in Canada, maybe in the US, I want you to remember this. Sometimes, the people who hurt you the most are the ones who should have loved you the hardest. But you get to decide how that story ends. You get to choose peace, even when chaos tries to claim you. Because at the end of the day, healing isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about remembering who you became after it did. And as I watched Ethan blow out his candles on his 10th birthday, surrounded by real friends, love, and laughter, I realized something. We didn't just survive. We started over.